All right, today we're making a microwave popcorn pouch inspired by microwave popcorn bags themselves. Who knew the great movie snack would be such a good beginner sewing pattern? This tutorial is for complete beginners, but I'm not going to cover all the machine basics, so setting up your machine and then basic sewing techniques. There's a video already out there that does that far better than I can. It's Glory Allen's sewing tutorial. It's part 4 of his series. The link will be in the description. By the end of this video, you'll have started to learn to think with fabric, and hopefully you'll start to think about how you can design gear for yourself using templates and patterns. You can grab the pattern and the instructions off the website. It's a great pattern to start with because it's wonderfully simple. It's really one piece of fabric that wraps around the bag with a zipper to connect the two halves, and then 2 lengths of webbing that hold the ends together and keep it shut. With the addition of a small loop here if you want to hang it, or a small loop of elastic if you'd like to roll it up and keep it compact for storage. Otherwise, that's all. Simple to make, but then also can be used in so many different use cases. Let me give you an example. By using a rubberized material, it becomes great for tools or a toolkit. It's even pretty waterproof, which is great. With a slippery material on the inside and a little space for thread, it becomes a really good knitting pouch. And if you push it a little bit, it can become the foundation for whole products. Like, this is now my afternoon Sunday golf sling, and all it is one popcorn pouch sewn to one extra long popcorn pouch that just didn't have the end closed off. I just left it open and put some binding on it. So by learning to make this and then thinking about what dimensions the things you need to store are, you can expand it to suit. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a window into how you can design your own gear. All right, so let's get set up. What do you need? You will of course need a sewing machine. Basically any sewing machine is going to do the job. One caveat. You'll need either a machine that has a zipper foot or the ability to move the needle position to one side of the presser foot, which is this little guy here. We have to sew quite close to the zipper coil, and by moving the needle across or using specifically a zipper foot, you can navigate that really easily. You can do it without, it's just kind of annoying. Aside from this, you'll need some chalk to mark on the pattern, a handful of clips to hold parts in place, a ruler for marking, measuring and cutting if you're using a roller cutter, some thread snips, great for cutting excess thread, a thread ripper in case you make some mistakes of course, 2 sets of scissors, 1 to cut the pattern, 1 to cut the fabric, and a lighter to help burn the threads and any binding that's looking a bit messy. A couple of optional extras. If you printed your pattern A4, which I have, you'll need a bit of tape to tape it together. You could also use a roller cutter to cut the fabric. Super easy, it's all straight lines. Not needed, but great to have. You'll also need a cutting mat. We use a table, but they look like this. Also optional, an iron. Generally not optional, but because this is such a small piece of fabric and as long as it's close enough to flat, you're not gonna really need anything crazy. So if you want it, grab it. If not, don't worry about it. And lastly, fabric weights. If you've got something to weigh the pattern down while you're cutting, awesome. But again, it's so small and it's just a rectangle, so not much to worry about here. You can use anything around the house that's got a bit of weight to it. If you bought the pack from us, all of this is going to be included. But if you bought the pattern, this is your little checklist and reference point for what you need. A swath of material. I'm using the upcycled fly of a tent. That sounds odd. Whipwork is an entirely upcycled brand, so we do whatever we can to use upcycled materials from the outdoor gear industry, tents, backpacks, gear like that, because it's super strong and robust and still has a great life, and we think we can make great products from it. So yeah, top of a tent for the main material, a zipper off the fly or liner of a tent, a little piece of elastic that I pulled off the front of a backpack, and a few lengths of binding for cleaning up the edges of the bag. All the exact lengths are in the instructions. You'll of course also need a printed pattern, and I'm going to add a little whipwork tag. All our A4 patterns come with a little reference measure. So to make sure you print it at the right size, make sure you get your ruler and just make sure that measures up to 25 mil, which it does. There are diamonds in each of the corners of the pattern for the A4 so that you can align them nicely. Now starting with the top, let's align those two so that the diagonal points meet. And I'm just going to tape that down. So once you've stuck them all together, grab your craft scissors. Let's cut out the pattern. All done. Grab our fabric, throw it down underneath, I'm going to put my pattern on the left-hand side just so I can save as much fabric as possible, as you can see. I mark with my chalk and a ruler what part I need to cut. Now you don't have to mark, you can just go straight to cutting, especially if you have a roller cutter and a ruler. But I'm going to mark it just for the sake of precision and to show that you don't need too many tools to do this. So that's marked. The last thing I'm going to do is just shift the pattern over just a fraction to each side once I've finished the square, and use my chalk to mark the notches, which are our little measuring reference points for the folds later on. And I'll show you what to do with those in a moment. But I'm just going to, so move the pattern slightly to the left and to the right, and just mark those notch points like that. Beautiful. That's that basically done. You can go over there. Fabric scissors now. Let's give this a cut. Great little technique. Tip is to leave the bottom half of the scissors on the table you're cutting and hold behind, and you get like a nice, even, straight cut. Cool. That is that finished. Save your scraps for a later project if you need to. So that's that cut. Now all I need to do is cut very small cuts where the notches were. So those little chalk marks, I'm just making a 5mm cut using the very end of the scissors. These will just act as reference points for later in the bag. Cool, all done. Great. So it looks like a tiny little cut, as you can see there. Fabric cut. The machine settings for this are really simple. You want to have it on your straight stitch, which for me is stitch number 2. Often it's number 1 or A. You want to have a standard stitch length of between 2 and 3. I'll talk to the needle position in a sec, but generally you'll have it centered. We'll just need it to be on the left-hand side for the zipper. And the presser foot pressure standard again, somewhere between 4 and 5. Let's get making this popcorn pouch. First thing we're going to do is attach the zipper. So we're actually going to separate the two halves and remove the zipper pull. So for the purpose of this tutorial, that's the zipper pull. These are the zipper tracks, and the whole thing is called a zipper. With your fabric facing upwards, so the side you want to see facing upwards, we're going to place the zippers along the short ends of the fabric with the coil or the track facing downwards and pointing, given it's on one side, pointing towards the center of the bag. And we're going to clip that into place. Yeah, looks something like that. And we're basically ready to sew. One thing you want to note is that now is the time to either swap out to your zipper foot, or if you can move the needle to the left, move it as far as you can to that left-hand side. In terms of alignment and seam allowance, where the foot and needle position should be, you want to align the edge of the presser foot as close to the track as you can without pushing the zipper into the bag. Remembering that if this is your first time sewing, this is maybe your first stitch, you'll want to back stitch and then go forward and then back stitch at the end. So what that means is there's a reverse on your sewing machine. You want to start by doing a few steps forward and then holding that reverse, going back a few, and then going forward again. This locks those stitches into place, means they can't separate. So after doing my few stitches back and forth, along I tick and remove the clips as you go. And use the hand wheel if you need to roll the needle out, lift up the presser foot, and clip it if you have a blade. Otherwise, use your thread snips to trim the excess threads. Same again, a few back, a few forward, keeping that presser foot aligned neatly to the edge of the zipper coil. I like to keep my hands just gently against that coil to stop it from moving, and then feed with my backhand. Smash it. If that was your first few stitches, well done. Now, we're gonna flip and secure those zipper tracks with a top stitch. So, what does that mean? We are going to get the zipper tracks that we just sewed, flip them over, press them flat, and we're gonna go back and sew that fold neatly down. For your needle position, it can now go back into the center. You should be able to just nest the right side of the presser foot up against the zipper coil, little bit of reverse, and then off we go forward. Remember to gently pull the fabric and zipper apart to keep that fold nice and neat. Lovely. Top stitched. So you'll see 2 lines with thread on the back, 1 on the front now, and this zipper will be pressed nice and sewn flat. Ben from the future. So I got halfway through the editing process for this video and I realized I've got to talk about seam allowance of all things. And since this is a beginner tutorial, let me just quickly cover it. Essentially, when you sew 2 pieces of fabric together, there will always need to be some fabric on the outside of the seam or stitch line. So when I say to sew at 10mm seam allowance, I'm referring to you sewing 10mm in from the edge of the fabric. So how do you do that consistently? Well, on your foot plate, there are numbers. Usually they're in inches and in millimeters. When you go to sew something, and if I say 10mm, what you want to do is align your fabric with the 10 and then sew with your needle in the center along the fabric and maintain the edge of the fabric in line with that 10. There's a finished seam, and you can see above that line of white stitching is 10mm. So that's your seam allowance. So when I say sew at 10mm, that's what I mean. Okay, optional step, but an easy one. We're just going to sew in this elastic loop so that if you'd like to, you can keep it stored when it's not in use. I'm going to measure to the center of this bag and just mark with a bit of chalk. Once I've done that, I'm just going to clip the elastic in place, just like that. And with your needle back in the center, regular straight stitch, 2 to 3mm, and sewing at a seam allowance of 10mm. And I'm going to sew this elastic in place. Best way to do it is start with the press foot in the middle of the elastic and then just go back and forth a few times. Beautiful. That'll just make sure it's nice and strong. Elastic installed. All right, getting close. Believe it or not, that's like halfway through. Next step, load the zipper pull back on. Fold your pouch back up. At the end that doesn't have the elastic, assuming you install it. If it doesn't matter. Grab your scissors, and we're just going to nip off one side of the excess zipper so that it looks like that. Once you've trimmed one side of the zipper, use your thread snips or the scissors to trim any excess fabric away and clean up that coil if it's a little bit misshapen, just so you have a nice clean edge. Then grab your lighter and just melt back and seal the end of that zipper. Stops it from fraying and getting in the way of the zipper coil when you're loading the zipper pull back on. Grab our zipper pull, and the side that hasn't been clipped, load the zipper pull back on, like that, slide it on, and pull it down to where the fabric starts. Going to get our zipper track from the other side, and we're going to gently slot it into the zipper head, and I'm going to just gently pull this side up firmly into the zipper pull. And you'll hear it give slightly, or you may just feel it give, and you should be able to then place it down, gently pull on the zipper, and we're closed. Be careful not to pull it the whole way off the other end. I do it all the time. Second optional step. We're going to install a small loop of binding so that you can hang this off things. I've often used this as a little toiletries bag. So having this just being able to hang off something in the bathroom, super useful. How do we do that? Well, in your pack, if you bought it, or as per your instructions, cut yourself a small length of binding, and we're going to fold it in half and clip it in place. So 2 and 3, like that. If your binding ends up fraying, again, light up just to seal it. Slot the binding underneath, somewhere in the middle, doesn't matter too much. Done. Now you have a thin folded piece of binding that we are going to attach to the top of your little popcorn pouch. We're going to fold it and attach it at the top, same end as the elastic, pointing back into the bag. Now when you sew this, we're just going to be individually sewing 1 and 2, just right at the corners. Just going to align the edge of the fabric with the edge of the presser foot and sew across and back and forth. And the same on the other side. Few forward, few back. All loaded in. So disconnected from the back, got sewn in place, and yeah. Now we don't need all this excess zipper anymore, so we're going to clip that all off. grab your scissors and just cut off the excess ends of the zipper on both sides. None of that's needed anymore. Great. Now we're going to create the folds that allow this bag to expand. This is where your notches come in. Start by finding your notches on one side of the bag. And I want you to fold the fabric between those notches, so you've got 2 notches there, back into the bag. You want the fabric to fold at the notch points. And then you're just going to clip that and hold it in place. Going to repeat that on the other side. Lovely, looking good. Okay, now is also the time to install your whipwork tag. So now that that's clipped, we're going to sew across the top and bottom, and then it'll just need to be bound and you'll be done. I'm going to sew at 10mm seam allowance. When you get to the zipper track, feel free to hand roll through those heavy bits. Your machine may get a little stuck. It's normal, that's okay. Side 1 finished, looking good. Looking nice, almost done. Last step, let's do it. Grab your lengths of binding and we're going to fold them over each end. And we're going to clip that in place. Should look a little something like that. Now, when you clip the binding, you can see that there's little threads showing below the binding, which I have here, just on one of the ends of the webbing loop. You can grab your scissors and you can just trim off a little bit of the end. So within that seam allowance, just snip off 2 to 3mm excess, which I don't need anymore, and just reapply the binding and hide all that excess thread. A recommendation for your clipping, clip right to the corners for this binding, because we're actually going to start on the inside and leave a section out the ends that isn't sewn, and that'll allow us to fold the excess back underneath and have a really clean finish. That'll make sense in the next step, but for now, just trust me and clip right on the corners. I'm going to align the presser foot so that the right edge of the presser foot is aligned with the fold of the binding. And I'm going to start approximately 30mm inside the outside fold here. And I'm also going to finish about 30mm early. I'm using white thread for illustrative purposes, so you can see. It will start and finish a little bit earlier, as you can tell. I recommend that you use black thread here, or the color of the binding, because often this stitch is a little bit messy because you have to do it in 3 sections, and you may not want to have the back tacks, the reverse stitches that you do to hold this stitch in place, visible. That's the binding mostly sewn. Very last step, we're going to hide these binding tails underneath themselves so that you don't have a raw edge at the end. Now, obviously, there's a lot of excess here, so we got to trim a fair bit of it. I'm going to trim so there's about 20mm extra on each side. It doesn't have to be super precise. You just need this length here to be slightly less than the length that you've sewn to, so that it can be tucked underneath and not butt up against itself. And now I'm going to fold this underneath so that it is nice and neat and tidy, and just clip that in place like that. And when it's all folded, it should look a little something like that. Clip them on the outside because I'm going to start stitching at this point and heading out this way. So as usual. That's it, pouch finished. Hopefully that was easy enough for you. Thanks for joining me with this one. Happy sewing wherever you go next.